Hello students, and in this video we're going to be learning how to use direct quotations in your writing.
So as you write your paper, whether it's informational or argumentative or any kind of article you write, you should always, always, always try to use direct quotations in your papers, and also paraphrasing of ideas. The more evidence you can provide and the more direct quotes you can use, the more knowledgeable you sound about the topic.
Just to preface this, we want you to use direct quotations and we want you to use a few of them at least
Hmm.
per paper, but just like anything in moderation,
Right.
right? You don't want to have quotes coming out of nowhere, which we'll
They
talk
have to
about.
be fit. They have to fit into your paper.
Okay, so let's begin on how to use direct quotes and why you would use direct quotes.
Direct quotes brings validity to your writing. It makes you seem like you know what you're talking about. It provides importance to the evidence that you're providing. It makes you look like you've done a lot of research, and it makes the reader think that you know what you're talking about and prove that other experts also think like you do about whatever your topic is or your thesis is that you're trying to prove.
This next one's a big one. Bring some variety to your writing to keep the reader's attention. Oftentimes, and I know that Mrs. VJ feels the same way, is that when we're reading student work, it sometimes feels like it's a big paragraph,
List
it's a
of
list of
stuff.
reasons.
Hmm.
And although you should be providing analysis as well, putting a direct quote in breaks things up a little bit. It does bring a little variety to the writing style,
Right.
which is important. And if you're saying something, for example, if you say that we should go to war with Syria because this is happening, and then you include the quote from the expert that backs that thinking up, like it just makes you look, it makes your argument so much stronger. It makes the point so much more valid.
It makes it seem like somebody who is an expert at this is also agreeing with what you're saying.
Exactly.
So when you go to put quotes into your paper, another thing that I tend to notice happens is that students like to just plop their quotes in to their paper. And you really want to make sure that your quotes flow smoothly. And so there's some strategies you can use to make your quotes flow smoothly. First, it's usually a good idea to introduce a quote with the author's name or a source from where it came from. See that girl over there with the book on her head screaming? She was really angry because you used one of her quotes and you didn't cite her correctly. So one way is to put the author's name in front of the quote, or at the end of the quote, make sure that you use your parenthetical citations and cite correctly according to MLA format. But make a connection between the quote and the previous statement before you just drop a quote into your paper, or there's no flow and you leave the reader wondering, why does this quote here? Did it just fall out of the sky into the paper?
Okay, so the quote has to have a reason.
Right.
And some ways that you can make this happen, um, according to history expert Mr. Nash, such and such occurred, and then you put what I said in my paper in between the quotes. Characterized by Jane Doe, the society is, that's a little bit more sophisticated way to do it. As one critic points out, um,
John Doe believes. So basically what you're doing is you're letting the author know that a quote is coming. You're almost making a transition to the quote. So whenever you use a quote, think about what are some signals that you're going to give to the reader to say that this quote is coming in. You could think of these quote signals as like quote transitions. You always have to have a transition into your quote so that your paper flows and so that the reader knows that the quote is coming and can expect it coming. Um, Make your quotes in a variety, your leads to your quotes a variety so that the reader doesn't get bored with hearing the same thing over and over again, kind of like that little hamster there. He gets water every day, and boy, he'd like some tomato juice or some fruit punch every once in a while instead of just plain old water.
yeah, if it's just according to this, according to this,
According to that,
this,
and
according to
according to
this,
this person,
that just
it gets really
yeah,
monotonous.
yep. So here's an example of how a quote is used in an actual history text. So like Mrs. VJ said, quotes should never be randomly plopped into your writing. Rather, they kind of become woven into the paragraph. So let's read this paragraph and see how this author was able to take this quote and put it into the context of the paragraph. New voting laws in the early 1800s allowed for more Americans to take part in the democratic process. Quote, in 1824, only 356,038 Americans bothered to vote in the presidential election. 4 years later, 1,155,340 Americans went to the polls to elect President Andrew Jackson. End quote. Jackson took that word democracy, which scared some people, and glorified it. He made our republic a people's government.
So you can see that before the quote, we kind of lead you into the quote by telling you a little bit about what early laws what happened in the 1800s to laws. Then the quote kind of smoothly flows in. And then, of course, right after the quote, we give an analysis. Now, one thing I didn't do in this, and I probably should have, and I would expect this from you, is at the end of the quotation, cite again. Where did this come from? I copied this out of a book, and the author didn't cite that quote, but you should always cite where that quote came from in parentheses after the quotation if you're not going to say before the quote who said it, all right?
Yeah, so this one doesn't say like according to such and such in 1824, but I like the way they wove the quote in without saying that, so it just kind of fit.
Mm-hmm.
But they could have said according to Vibert in 1824 only this, and then gone on, and then they wouldn't have had to worry about the citation necessarily. They still have to cite it where appropriate, but not at the end there.
Okay. Just a little side note, here's a picture of President Andrew Jackson beating up the man who tried to assassinate him. He was the only president of the United States to actually have an assassination attempt and go after the person who assassinated him and beat the guy up.
Yeah.
You can go look up more about that on Google if you'd like.
Jackson's crazy. Okay, so that's it on using direct quotes. You noticed how we showed you how you could put a quote in your paper, the reasons why you would do it, and adding quotes is going to make your work look more valid.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to vary your writing style up a little bit, so it's not just a list of evidence.
It keeps your paper interesting to the reader.
And it's going to make you sound a lot more sophisticated in your writing.
Definitely.